Hello, 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 everybody. I am Rosalind Brown of Your Wealth Guidance. Thank you for joining me again for another Great Money Monday. As always, we provide you tools and resources to use on your financial independence journey so you can live life on your own terms. Now, today, I was super excited about our speaker today. So, we talk about all the very traditional, we've talked about changing careers in a number of different ways. But I know a lot of ladies are saying, okay, I don't have enough money to just simply retire. But I want a remote job. I want a job with flexibility. I want an opportunity to kind of make my own hours. Maybe you don't want to be a quote unquote business owner and hustle and all those kind of things. There's an option for you. And so today we have Miss Raven Black. She is a virtual dominatrix, phone sex operator, and content creator. And so, a little background about Miss Raven Black. In 2021, she found herself underemployed. I know somebody like, yep, struggling with depression. Yep. In the midst of ending an 18-year relationship, and she was forced with a difficult situation. How will she care for herself and for pets financially without the help of a partner or family for the first time in her adult life? And so I know a bunch of people are probably in that same situation. They're like, I'm overwhelmed with life. I'm overwhelmed with decisions. I don't want to take on a second job. I want to take on a side hustle. Um, and you're like, what am I going to do? And so, Miss Raven Black, tell us, how did you come to this saying, all right, I'm going from, straight corporate life to this whole other world? Like, how did that come about?
So that's a great question. A lot of people ask me that because it's such a transition from, like you said, just doing a regular job to doing something so dramatically different. So how I came into it was it's a pretty long story, but to kind of put it into perspective. So I was 18 years old, and I've known from since I was a young child up until my teenage years that I just was not very well suited for traditional workplaces. I was always kind of that person that wanted to get to the top and make changes and give feedback. And I noticed like a lot of the jobs that I was in, they said that they cared about that stuff, but let's be honest, they really don't care about that stuff. They don't really care about feedback. It's going to go however they want it to go and just clock in and clock out. And so throughout my jobs, being a lifeguard, being customer service, tier two tech support, I've done a lot of different things. I worked a construction job before.
Oh my goodness.
So if you need to know how much of a hard ass I am, that will prove it. I was in the trenches with the grown men digging and laying pipe. That was me for a while. And just I tried to find my niche, and I came to the conclusion that I think it's just not for me. I think the traditional workplace is just not for me. Being set to a schedule, not really having a say on really what I do, having no opportunity to move up was very demotivating for me. And then on top of all that, I'm not even getting paid what I feel like I deserve. So at the age of 18, a little personal, but I was also at the time I was in a relationship, which eventually became my husband. And I realized that I was struggling also with a lot of things going on with my sexuality, as far as just not knowing what I like, not really feeling comfortable in my body. And I was a late bloomer. So even being 18, that was all very confusing to me. And so it's interesting how now that part of not really feeling comfortable in who I was as a sexual person, on top of not knowing what type of income, what type of job I wanted and not getting the income I wanted, somehow, some way, I started searching on the internet. And at some point, because I'm a people watcher, so I came across these sites where there would be women and, men, of course, who would just live stream and they would get paid to do certain acts. So, you might shake your booty for $10, or you might, blow a kiss for $5, just something like that. And I was so interested in just watching them converse with their audience and things like that. And then I realized I could actually do that. Like, I would love to be confident like that woman who's, expressing her sexuality like I wish I could. And on top of having, being able to get paid to do that stuff, I just started looking into the sites that I was on. I saw like what the requirements were. And behind my partner's back, I, I streamed like for a couple of days off and on when I was at home and he was at work. And it really brought out just my feeling of more having more confidence and being able to kind of express myself in that way. And so from there, I stopped because I was in a relationship and I couldn't really hide it anymore. But as the years went by, I kept thinking about it, as I was taking on more and more jobs. And I was thinking, I'm an adult now. I'm way more confident. Let me look into this a little bit more, maybe. And I just never did it until it got to the point where I was ending my relationship, which was my marriage. I'd already been married for 7 years at that point, and it got to the point where I realized this relationship is dramatically unhealthy. And it was unhealthy enough that we just physically could not even be in the same space anymore. And I decided I have to end this marriage. I'm going through, depression and having suicidal thoughts, and to the point where I'm not even caring about my animals anymore. That's how difficult that relationship was. And when I decided to end it, I was now in this place where I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? At this point, I was working in a hospital. I was just, an environmental technician. So I was just pretty much a cleaner. And I was making $15.75 an hour. And that wasn't going to do anything for me personally. And me thinking, how am I going to be able to take care of my cats who I love so much and I care for, and take care of myself as an adult, making $15.75 an hour in a job that I don't even like. And so at that point, I started thinking about camming again. And when my husband was at work, I decided, okay, what do I need to get? I need a webcam because I don't have any other options right now. So I need to put my all into something that I know is probably going to be sustainable because I've done it before. So I bought the webcam, I bought the microphone, I got a couple of outfits. And at this point, I didn't have a niche yet. So I just went into it like, okay, let me just do it pretty much and just dive into it and see what happens. And another thing that my relationship made me do is realize I'm not submissive at all. Like there is not a bone of submissiveness in my body. And that relationship really showed me that. And when I started camming, I realized that the way that I would speak to a lot of these men, it wasn't very cutesy and, oh, what can I do for you? And, that whole different thing that never worked for me, even though I tried it for a long time, maybe probably 5 or 6 months. I was that girl. And I realized at a certain point, this is not going to sustain me because I don't talk to men like this. That's not who I am. I'm gonna have to bring the real Raven out, because that's what's going to really be going to keep me in this job, is if I'm doing what comes naturally to me and within my boundaries. And I discovered fetish and BDSM, and that led me into female domination. And as soon as I found out about it, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds just like me. Like I'm telling the men what to do. They do what I want, and I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. And they like that. I can be mean. Okay, cool. Let me try it. And I've been doing that for the next 2.5 years. And that's how I came into it. And I discovered that specific niche in this industry that worked for me and my personality. And it's been very successful since I've started.
Now, I think that's a good point, because you talk about, you just enter I'm just imitating some of the things that you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so how important is it to have a niche, or for people to kind of find what side or what role they want to play?
Yes, that's super, super important. When you get, and people have to understand that this is not easy work. And I'm glad that you brought this question up, because that's what I wanted to dive into. This is not something where it may sound like I'm explaining it that way, but I didn't start making consistent, comfortable enough income that I could literally just do this until it was about a year into it. And had I not found my niche, I probably would not have been able to say that, because I would have not continued on with that work. For me personally, that's just how my personality is. If it doesn't feel right in my spirit, I could do it, but eventually I'm not going to be able to do it anymore. I have to stay true to myself, even if it is for money, because going against your own boundaries and not knowing who you are, whether it's going to be part of your own personality that you bring into your work or a character or half and half, you have to be able to sustainably be able to do that thing over and over and over, day after day after day. So that's why it's important for you to know, okay, what do I like? What would interest me? What is a character that I can throw on when I work that's sustainable, that's within my boundaries, that would be fun or exciting for me? You kind of have to use your kind of childhood imagination to think about what character makes you feel the sexiest or makes you feel, I don't know, for me it will be the most in control. What character do you feel like you can get online every day and be able to do that every day and feel good about yourself when you look in the mirror every day? That's very important for me. And even though I am in the sex industry, because it's still sex work, since it is fetish work, that's very important because I think a lot of people get it misconstrued that when you get in this industry, you have to do things that you don't want to do. And that's definitely not true, especially as a dominatrix. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And if they do make you do something that you're not comfortable with, then you charge them 4 times and they will pay. But my point is, I'm half joking, but stay true to your boundaries at all times, because that has led to burnout for so many women that I personally know, where they work their butts off for 6 months, doing all types of things because they had something to pay for, or they were maybe in a bad situation, what have you. And you may not see them for a couple of years because they are just so drained by just doing things that they really can't sustain. So the easiest way I would say to be able to find your niche is to do the same thing that I did. Just get on camera. You don't have to have your character finalized before you click live. You just need to get on there. And a lot of times talking to these men will bring out parts of you that you may not have discovered had you not started talking to, other people from all different walks of life. That helped me realize who I was, because so many men would say, you're very dominant, you're very, confident, you come across like this and this and that. And those words and that feedback that they gave me helped me define what I wanted to be. And so sometimes they can't help you, honestly. They really can help you hone down on your character and your niche. And you need to figure out, what are your boundaries? What things do you feel comfortable doing, and what things do you not feel comfortable doing? Because there's so many different niches or fetishes is what I meant to say. And you have to learn these. You have to know the inner, because I work with men. So you have to know the inner workings of a man's mind, which can go from tame to very, very dark. I need to call the police. And you have to understand that before you get into it, so that you're not shocked. You know exactly, hey, I'll do that with you, or I won't do that with you. And a lot of times honing in on that niche, and that's part of the niche thing, is just knowing what you're into and what you're not, will come with time as you get comfortable on the camera. So that's one way I would say, is just get on the camera, or you can Google some fetishes, see exactly what's popular, and then do your research on, BDSM, because it will come up even if you're not a dominatrix. There are a lot of men who will go into rooms with women who don't even do fetish work and say, hey, are you into this? Will you do this with me? So it's a lot of education and psychology that you need to learn as well. And that will help you, again, with defining what your niche initially is going to be.
Now, one question, I know some people are like, okay, what's the difference between being a dominatrix or just being on camera? What is the biggest difference in terms of that definition?
That's a good question. So for what I can say, the difference to me is, for what I call a traditional, or they'll say vanilla cam model. A traditional cam model appeals to the man. So your whole objective is to be sensual and sexy and enticing, and going essentially within your boundaries again, but essentially feeding into what their fantasies are and what they want you to do, and kind of seeing you as this sexual being that they can be with and use and engage with. Being a dominatrix is very different for me personally, because the way that I act on camera, I don't care what you like. I may ask you what you like so that I can take advantage of whatever you're into, but mine is more calculated. It's more, what are you going to do for me? How are you going to serve me? How are you going to please me and my needs? And then I might engage with you if I want to on whatever you're personally sexually into. So it's more so the man is coming to you as, here I am, how can I serve you? How can I please you? So you can see how that's a lot different than essentially the woman saying, how can I please you? I'm now saying to the man, how are you going to serve me? And that's the biggest difference. It's female focused. And that's why I say I'm in the female domination space, because we do engage with men and their fetishes within whatever we decide is okay. But at the end of the day, they do have to pay, and not just literally, but you do things that I want to see from you. So it's not about just me giving to you. It's how are you going to serve me, and then I'll engage with you.
Now, in terms, you brought up burnout, and I think one of the ways or one of the reasons some people are thinking about, maybe I should make this change, maybe I should do this on the side, is because they don't want the corporate America type burnout that they may already have,
Mhm.
or, working towards, or maybe way past burnout at this point in time. What are the hours? Like, what are the requirements? Are we 24 hours? Is it, 12 midnight till noon? What are the typical hours or time commitment to get to a point where you have sustainable income?
So the good thing about this since I'm an independent contractor, the great thing about camming specifically, or even being a phone sex operator, content creator, there is no schedule. There is no set schedule. I always say to people, there are men awake at every time of the day, 24-hour, 24/7, 365. Somebody's going to be awake and somebody's going to want to see you. So you're not held to a schedule because you don't have an employee, or you don't have an employer. You are your own employer. They simply provide you with the platform to do as you please within their terms and conditions, of course. But if you want to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can do that. If you want to work for 10 minutes, you can. If you want to work for 17, 20 hours, you literally can do that. And that's what I like the most about it, is you essentially don't have to be set to a schedule or income. So it's like with a traditional job, I know every single week how much I'm going to make, generally speaking. Most people, they already know this is my hourly wage or this is my salary, whatever. You're already set that. Like it's set in stone. There's not much wiggle room up and down. But when you're self-employed and in this industry, you can take advantage of, say, for example, there's certain holidays that are busier. So you can get online at any time of the day if you're available and take advantage of that. Um, or if you have to build a certain schedule for yourself, like say you might have children that you have to tend to, or like you said, you're working a full-time job and you can't manage to do so many hours, then you can only work, if you only need to work an hour, you can only work an hour. Nobody's ever going to ping you, or send you an email and say, hey, why weren't you here at 4 a.m. in the morning? You can work as little or as much as you want. And the other thing that I would say about that, though, is in the very beginning, I always highly recommend for people to do as many hours as humanly possible, just because on these sites, there are literally hundreds of thousands of models on at any amount of time during the day. So, as a newcomer, you have to have your face out there. People are not going to be able to find you if you're only online, once or twice during the week. So, I do say realistically, if you want to be able to make this into a sustainable income for the long term, then any opportunity that you can get online, put on the hours, different times during the day if you can manage, so that you have an audience at night, an audience in the afternoon, or audience, in the morning. Just get your face out there and put in the hours initially so you can build up your audience. And then over time, as time goes on, the likelihood of you being able to sustain it financially will be more feasible because people know you.
Now, when you're talking about camming and you're like, just go live, is that you and a bunch of people watching you? Is that one on one? What does that look like?
So for the sites that I work for, it typically is pretty much the same setup. So you have your webcam connected, you have your microphone connected, whatever you use, and then you log into the site. There will be a button there that might say go live or go online. And when you do press that button, anybody from around the world that has access to your room, they can literally just see you. So say I'm going to the front page of a website and I'm trying to scroll through and see who I want to engage with. They will see like your little preview photo up there, whatever you decide, however you want to pose. It'll usually have where you're located in the world, so your little American flag or wherever you're from, your age, and your stage name, and then your photo. And all they have to do is click on that, and you're now in your own room with people from all around the world that can now log into your web stream, your cam stream. And now you're pretty much able to sit in a room amongst, it could be one person, it could be 10, it could be 20. It really just depends on where your traffic is, but it'll always be a group setting where there's public interaction. Now, if they want to go private with you, they have that option. So essentially, you have your prices up there. It's such and such amount per minute if you just want to engage with me, or it's such and such amount a minute if you want to be in an open private room, but where other people can pay to join and see what's going on. So there's, two different options there. Usually they just want to be one-on-one. And so once they click on this button that says go exclusive or go private, now your cam is streaming to their computer, and they can also turn their cam on if they want to, so you can view them. But otherwise, it's pretty much like a shut room where it's just you and the other person interacting.
Now, in terms of the difference between the camming and the phone sex, because some people might say, all right, I don't want anybody to see my face. I want them to know it's me.
Mm-hmm.
I still work X. And so they want to do this on the side without being known. Is that possible as well?
Definitely. There are many that I even know personally who have never shown their face. They've never shown below their lips. And people pay and they want to see them because they have their personality, their niche, they have a nice body, whatever the situation may be, whatever brings them to you. So you can definitely remain anonymous if you want to. I know people who use little, with AI becoming so popular, a lot of people have started to kind of use that to build a virtual character for themselves. And there are some men who are into that. So you can definitely, especially if you want to be in this industry in some capacity, but you want to be anonymous, phone sex is perfect because you're just talking to them on the phone. So they don't need to see your face. You're not going to be video chatting with them. You can just take photos of yourself from the lips down or even from the chin down or whatever you want to do. And that, however you work that, you can entice them to be able to still call you and talk to you on the phone. Because also there's different audiences for different services too. And I like to tell people that too. So there may be somebody who just likes to buy your videos, but they don't want to do a live stream with you for whatever reason. I know there's a lot of guys who literally, they would only buy video clips from me and they will not send me a text message. They will not call me on the phone. They don't want to do video chatting. And then there's other guys who would never buy a video, but they only want to do cam to cam. And they don't want to buy videos. They don't want to chat. Their phone guys or their cam guys. So you will have a segment of the population that are just men who like kind of anonymous little encounters, or they just want a quick little call on the phone and they don't want to do anything else. So that's very possible. And a lot of people are successful at that.
Now, is there more money on one side versus the other?
That's a really good question. It is for some people. So what I mean by that is there are some people who I know who are only successful at being phone sex operators, and they cannot do camming for whatever reason. It just did not work for them, and there's no explanation really why, and vice versa. So yeah, I would have to say it depends on the person, but you can make thousands of dollars. I know people who make very, very good money on one of the sites that I've worked for with phone sex, and I'm on that same website, and I have made $5 this year. So it really just depends. I don't know why it's not working for me, but we go where we're appreciated. So for me though, camming has been phenomenal. And also, at least the other site that I work on, it combines phone sex and video chatting. But the bigger part of that site that I work on is texting. That's what a lot of men tend to do, is text. And that has bought me in, a couple thousand extra dollars a month just on texting and sending photos and videos back and forth. And that is a godsend for when you're having those lazy days, or if it's a slow day on cam. And I literally sit here on the couch with my cat on my lap, and I'm just answering text messages all day. And it's very easy, and you can do that anonymously as well. So there's no, one side or the other that makes more. It really just depends.
Now, are there downsides? So people are like, all right, maybe this is for me. Should I try it? Are there things that people should be aware of or should just be prepared for before they get started?
100%. And I'm going to put this out there. If you ever talk to anybody, audience or otherwise, if you ever talk to anybody about any form of sex work and they don't tell you anything negative, they're lying to you. There are many negatives, but it just depends on, again, you as a person. So I would have to say some of the negatives can be, there are slow periods. There are definitely slow periods. There have been days where I have made up to $168 an hour, and I was doing great. And then the very next day, I'm like, wow, I've been on for 3 hours and I made $10. What's going on? So that is a huge possibility, is you just never know. Now, as time, like I said, as time goes on and you establish an audience, that's less of a, it's less of an issue, because your good days pretty much cancel out your bad days, as long as you have that group of regulars and et cetera, et cetera. But those slow periods can really damage your self-esteem. It can make you feel some type of way, like, wow, how did I make a lot of money yesterday, and now today nobody even wants to stay in my room for 2 seconds? Like, what is going on? What's wrong with me? And you have to have very, very thick skin, because again, I'm not trying to sound like a man hater, but I'm just saying, as somebody in the industry, I see the brains of men that most women do not see. And because I see these men on camera as well, these are regular, degular men. These are not weirdos or creepy, creepy crawlies in the corner of the internet. These men look like they could hand you your burger at Five Guys or be your child's teacher. I'm just saying. So with that, you have to be prepared to have exposure to men who have all types of sexual interests and fetishes. Because like I said, it could go from very tame and innocent to, you need to go to speak to a psychiatrist. And I mean that. I've told my friend about some of the stuff, because she wanted to get into the industry. And I've been honest with her about some of the conversations that I've had. I've sent her text messages of conversations I've had with these men online. And she's like, nope, I can't. I don't know. Because, and for me, it's very tame, because I'm used to it by now. So that's a little different. But you have to, I would recommend that you reach out to someone who's already in the industry first, and just, especially dominatrix, have them tell you the types of conversations that they tend to have with these men, so that you're aware, because they will be very brutally honest with you. Another thing is, I know we're probably most of the women that I'm communicating with, because I'm in my early 30s. So I would assume most of, this audience is probably a little bit older, like within my range and older. So maybe we don't have to care so much, but there are people who still care about family and, romantic relationships and et cetera, like the people in your lives. If they were to know about what you choose to do for work, if they were to find out, would you be able to deal with that? Would you be able to confidently say, yes, this is my choice of work and I enjoy it? Or are you going to be humiliated and embarrassed? You have to think about, are you going to be able to face that if that were to ever happen at some point during, your choice, whatever, however long you decide to do that work? There is a lot of negative opinions, and that's kind of being very tame with that, about sex workers of all facets, from people who just take pictures of their feet and nothing else, all the way to people like me. It can be very, very difficult to deal with when you start to hear people's opinions about sex workers. And it can go from simple stuff like insults to possibly hating us enough that they threaten us with harm. And I've had that happen many times. I've been stalked twice. Okay. Just on the internet. But when men get told no, they go crazy sometimes. And you have to be able to deal with those experiences. So it is very fulfilling, at least for me, it's very fulfilling. And I don't foresee me stopping this work because it's giving me everything I need for what I need right now in my life. But don't take this industry lightly, because it can lead to, even with mental health. My own company offers mental health
Mhm.
services just because this industry can be very difficult. And it's very emotionally taxing. You're going to have men who are going to tell you that they're cheating on their wives. You'll have men that tell you that they're actually gay. You'll have all these different personal, like I literally have almost like therapist sessions, which I call therapist sessions, with
Mhm.
men who are 3 times my age, and just talk about all these things I've gone through in life. And you have to really have that thick skin and know how to interact with them, because you might hear some stuff that could either be triggering or just conversation that you may not want to really hear. So it's a lot that comes with it, and you have to really educate yourself on what possible experiences you might have to come across if you do decide to do this.
I think that's a really good point and something to consider. Someone says, are there some sites that you can recommend?
Yes, I don't know if there's a way I can type it. If I can, I will.
If you can't, I don't know if you can see the comments. If you put it in the private chat, I'll copy it and put it in there.
Okay, so I'll leave a couple sites. The main site that I recommend for webcamming is called Chatterbait. It's actually chatterbait.com. So that's a very good starter site. And that's the website that I started with. And the reason I recommend it is because their commission is very good. Um, and I also think that just starting off with camming, it's not as intimidating as some of the other sites with a lot of setup and, this widget and that widget. It's easier to just start off with that site. And also, I think you mentioned earlier that I didn't mention, but some of the sites maybe have different, qualifications. But
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, it's very simple. You just need an ID, um, sign some paperwork, tell them what your stage name wants, whatever you want your stage name to be, a little bio. And pretty much they're just trying to make sure that you're of legal age and that you are signing up and nobody's signing up for you, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really it. It's not a lot of, hoopla. If you're 18 years old and you have an ID, pretty much you're kind of in. Now whether you stay in, that's totally up to you. But they give everyone of legal age pretty much an opportunity. Another site that I would mention, as far as if you want to do texting and phone, this site does, I will preface this by saying that the site can be a little picky. So you might need to have a little bit of an audience already established. Like on Twitter is very heavy for sex workers. So sign up for Twitter. That's where all the sex workers are. That's where they advertise. Make sure you sign up for an account with whatever alias you want to use, and just start posting some pictures and making some posts. And then they'll be able to see that you're active and you have a little bit of an audience drummed up. And then they may be able to accept you then. I don't think I applied until I had about 1,000 followers on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen people with 300, 500 get accepted. But Sext Panther, SEXT, I put it in the private chat. That's the texting and phone. And you can also do video and photo exchange and video chatting. So whatever you prefer, you can pretty much do it on that site. So I recommend that one too.
Now, you talked about one, you've been stalked a couple times. How do you protect yourself? How do you protect either you don't want people to know where you live, you don't want people to know your government name, like all those kind of things? How do you protect yourself on these sites?
So for me, I will just say I'm a little bit of a daredevil. So even though, and I'll explain why, even though the sites that you work for, they have this amazing feature where you can block certain states or even entire countries, that is definitely an option. So let's say you live in Maryland like I do. You don't want your family or friends or anybody else or your ex or whoever to see you on Chatterbait. you can literally just go down the drop down list, click Maryland, save it, and it will not show it to anybody, as long as they're not on a VPN, because there's ways around that. But most people are not smart enough to know. So yeah, so you do have the option to block off your locations if you want. So that's a good thing. For me, I keep them all on. That's just my personal, that's just how I do it. I did block off my states, like, because I'm in the DMV area. So I initially blocked off DC, Maryland, and Virginia, but that was in the beginning when I wasn't as confident. But as time went on, I'm like, I'm not ashamed of what I'm doing. So why am I blocking? I don't care if my mom sees. Maryland, DC, and Virginia, I took off the list, and now whoever, wherever can see me. I just don't personally care. But when it comes to safety, I keep my cam room, for example, very plain. So there's no, memorabilia that will give away that I live in Maryland, or I mean, everybody's gonna know now, but it's okay. But I don't have anything, at least while I'm camming, that would give any indication of where I live. A lot of them will ask, where are you from? I will say I'm from the East Coast, because I'm comfortable with saying that, but you don't have to say that anything. You could just say, I don't give away my location. But I'll just say, oh, I'm in the East Coast. And then usually it stops there. Some of them will say, oh, what state? And then I'll say, no, I don't tell what state I live in, but I'm on the East Coast. And it pretty much drops at that point. So that's a good way, is just not telling people where you're at. Very simple. Or just don't say anything at all. Like, even if you're saying East, West, whatever, don't even say anything. The other thing is, if you have social media, like the Twitters, the Instagrams, and everything like that, before you take pictures, I know there's some things that I personally don't know about that are extra safety precautions. Like, for example, there's something with there's a setting on sometimes your phones that will kind of encrypt where you're located into the photo, but there's a way to turn that off. I would just probably Google that just in case.
Mm-hmm.
But from as far as like social media, same thing. Make sure that when I take a picture, again, there's nothing in the background that gives it away. I make sure that also I'm sometimes a little paranoid. So I do my camming all the way at the end where the last bedroom is, and my neighbors won't be able to hear me or know what I'm doing. Sometimes people really can listen in on what you're doing, because I've heard people say that their neighbors logged into their cam room because they found out that they were camming because of the noises they were making, which is
Oh,
strange.
wow.
Yeah. So to avoid that, just be private, I guess, with your work if possible. But other than that, I mean, I can honestly say that the risk of these things happening is very, very low. Usually men don't go to that extreme where they're flooding you with emails or trying to figure out where you live or anything like that. As long as you stick to your boundary of not telling them where you live, they won't keep asking, because they will try to push your boundaries and say, oh, well, she told me the East Coast. Let me figure out what state. Oh, she said near DC. Oh, well, she must be in Maryland or Virginia. So don't breadcrumb their way into answering a question that you didn't want to answer, is basically what I'm saying.
I think that's a good point. Tracy says that's metadata. So definitely, look up that, make sure you're not sharing too much of your metadata.
Yeah.
Now, if you were starting over today, so now you've been in it a few years, you got some experience, you've had some ups, some downs, and so forth. If you were starting over from scratch today, how would you start differently?
What I would start with doing is getting my mental health on track first before I even started camming. I would have been able to put in so many more hours and had so many more opportunities if I wasn't mentally struggling at the time. And although that's not something that I personally could have been able to control, I just wish that I had maybe gotten a little bit of a hone on that before I started, because it was a lot of back and forth. And that's why I bring up the importance of drumming up an audience in the very beginning, because another thing is, a lot of these sites will give you an opportunity where they will bump you up in their algorithm. So instead of you being at the bottom page or the third page, because you're new, they'll give you a very specific amount of time where you can be on the front page. And so you have as many eyes on you as possible. And that's super important, because once it goes away, you're on your own. There is no boost or anything like that. So whoever saw you then within that couple of days or a week or however long they give you, that's it. So, and not say it's impossible, but it's just going to be a lot harder, especially as a newbie. So I didn't take advantage of any of those. I think I signed up, I was approved, and I probably didn't start working until like 2 weeks later or something like that. So my I had no boost. So I had to do literally everything from scratch. And I wish that I had looked further into the terms and conditions and all of that before I started, because I would have known to take advantage of that. I didn't even learn about it until afterwards. So that's one thing that, or two things that I would have done differently. But other than that, I can't really say I would have done anything different, because I think that just giving it time and pushing through the bad days and celebrating the good days and just learning, taking it upon myself when I'm off of work to research these different fetishes and all these different things that comes with BDSM. Now that I have that information, because I took the time later on, I took that time. So I think it would have been good for me to research it from the very beginning. But I was early enough in my journey that when I did start to research, it really helped me, because I was able to kind of really get in the brains of my audience, to know what they like and how it works. And a lot of women, they just get into it and they don't know what, I mean, I just know the acronym, but I have no idea what the inner mechanisms of this is. I'm just going to say whatever you like, and then I'm just going to click off. But because I researched everything and I kind of got into the psychology of it, I keep them longer and they come back. So learning about these fetishes and learning a little bit of how the male brain works will help you out 100%. It sounds like it may not be as important, or not a big deal. I promise you, the most successful dominatrix that I know, a lot of them are in school for psychology, I learned. Because a lot of them, yeah, it's very interesting. A lot of them are learning about human psychology while they're interacting with people and having to use that skill. So learn about men, real men, like how they actually work, not what we've been told. Learn their sexuality, learn different fetishes, be educated on the industry that you're in, because a lot of people think, oh, it's just sex work. It's a lot. Like I said, it's emotionally taxing, and you do have to learn if you want to reach a higher level in your career, and you don't just want it to kind of be here and I'm just kind of getting by. You will bump yourself out by just doing your own little self-education. So everything else, I will say, I can't say I would do anything differently or did anything wrong. I think it was just a natural progression in my personal journey that needed to happen.
I think that's a really good point. KP asked the question, what's your end game, and has this affected your relationship with significant others?
Mm. So that's a good question. So my end game, really, honestly, I would like to, because I have had experience with that before, is doing in-person domination. And even though I dabbled with it a little bit, I still don't feel like I'm educated enough to engage in certain fetishes, because it starts to involve the body. It is not escorting, just to say you're not being intimate with your clients, because a lot of people might think that you're not. But as far as like the body, and there's certain tools that you can use on a human being that brings forth a certain feeling or certain emotion. And I'm not fully prepared to do that right now until I start to go to classes and educate myself. So in the future, I definitely would like to experiment with more in-person work. And honestly, right now, I'm just kind of enjoying the journey. I'm not looking at it as, okay, I'm going to use this and, for the next 5 years, and then that's it. I think right now, because I really do genuinely enjoy what I do and it's giving me what I need in so many different areas, I'm more so just concerned about stacking my money and putting it aside, so that if an opportunity does arise, as far as like a business or something of that sort, at least I have the financial means to be able to do that. But where I'm at in my life, especially because I'm still pursuing a divorce and processing, relocating, and all of that, that's like something that I think of like, okay, when I reach my 40s, let me see where I'm at. Do I still enjoy what I do? And if I don't, okay, so how am I going to pivot this into what I do want to do? But I think that comes with time. I'm like a butterfly. I never want to like stay in one place. So even if I said, okay, I'll open this business, I guarantee you 2 years later, I'll be doing something else. So this is just the most consistent because I really do enjoy it and I have control over what I do. So it's perfect. As far as relationships, um, so I can't answer that question because I have not dated since I've started doing this work and not really a dater. So I can't really answer that. I'm more like, again, I'm a butterfly. I like to just, let me just enjoy your company. We can go out, buy me some drinks, have a good dinner. And then, I'll maybe talk to you in like a month or something like that. So I'm not like a traditional dater. I'm more, I'm solely focused on myself right now. Just continuing to maintain my mental health and continuing to advance in my career, taking care of my beautiful fur babies, and focusing on my relocation. And then maybe when I get to Mexico, I might find somebody. I have a feeling it's probably going to happen. I don't know why. I'm waiting for that, really, because I'm kind of done with the U.S., man. Like, I'm over it. Let's see what Mexico is like, and then I might be able to answer that question later.
Stay open. Now,
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons, because of course, this is affording you the flexibility to move, to, not need a 9 to 5, not to clock in somewhere. How many days a week do you work?
Oof. Honestly, the most I work a week is 4 days. Um, yeah, I don't even, and like, especially as far as hours, there's one site that I work for that may have contests. So if you work a certain amount of hours, you get an extra bonus on your check, or if you rank in a certain, from 1 to 500 or something like that, if you rank at all for these couple of days or a week, you get this bonus. So those are the only times I will do up to 25 hours if needed. But generally speaking, I look at my weekly, like my hourly and like what my pay was and how long I work for the week. I can promise you I can count on one hand how many times I've seen anything more than 20 hours. Probably three fingers, because I don't like to work. I like to work enough that my goal is done for the week, and then I clock off, or I do my little, text messaging, because I don't really have to do too much. I'm very lazy. I'm gonna be honest. So, but yeah, I try to stick with 20 hours or less, and however many days it takes to make those hours, or it just depends. Because sometimes I have a certain goal for every week of how much I want to make, or a daily goal, and as long as I make that goal, I'm okay. But typically it's like 20 hours at the very most.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't work a lot.
80 hours. So that's definitely a huge difference in the
Right.
two. And so you said you're paid weekly. So it's really just kind of trying to, back into either what you need to make, and then, okay, I need to make that divided by 4 for the month.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And how long did it take you to get to that point? So I know you said in the beginning, people should be like online as much as they can. So they may be working a 40-hour week still when they first transition. So then they can scale back. How long would that take? So that's, is that 6 months? Is that a year? What do you think that would take?
It really depends on the person, but if I had to give an average, I would say give it at least 6 months. At least. There are anomalies. There are people who there's no rhyme or reason to it. It really isn't. There's some people who have been super successful in 3 months, and they just were overnight successes. There are people who I know who are now looking for another job because they have been doing this for years and years, and they just have not been able to sustain it. So it really depends. But I would say if you're going to go all into it, you know what your niche is, you have all your equipment set up, you're ready to go, you're prepared, I would say be consistent with it for at least 6 months. And I would say 9 times out of 10, you should be able to sustain, depending on what your financial needs are. But if they are relatively, reasonable, enough that you can pay your everyday bills and expenses, I would say at least 6 months.
Okay, that's not too bad.
No,
And
it's
then
not.
because I know you talked about, studying men and studying what they want, studying your niche to understand how you can be the best in your craft. How
Mhm.
long are you engaging with people? So you have the room is open, and you're doing the one-on-ones and so forth. Is that for an hour? Is that 10 minutes? What is the typical time period? So even if you have like, I don't really like this person, it's usually only what, 5 minutes? What is that time period typically?
It depends. There are some men who I will be engaging with for 30, 45 minutes at a time. Typically it doesn't go to like an hour, but I have had some sessions where it's gone up to an hour, which is extremely long time. I don't care what it is. That's so long. Um, but usually it's at least, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes on average, usually like 10 minutes or so. Um, but it just depends on the guy, whatever his personality is, whatever he's looking for. But you're not sitting there for like hours and hours, or like even 30 minutes, an hour, 45. It has happened, but generally speaking, you shouldn't expect, I'd say, any more than like 20 minutes, usually.
Now, is there, you said you're learning more to go from the virtual dominatrix to the in person. One, what is that transition like? And two, how do you find this information? Is it just, Googling everything, or is there a school for dominatrix or a mentorship program? What does that look like?
So, disclaimer, I I do a lot of things very differently. I'm very controversial, so I'll just say that. So do not listen to any of this advice I'm talking. But I just honestly, I had my Twitter up. I'll just say how I did it for my first session. I had my Twitter up already. I had like, I don't know, 1,000 or so followers or whatever. And I had men that knew that I was in this area, and they would ask, do you do in-person sessions? Do you do in-person sessions? At first, I didn't want to do it, but I said, well, I can do some little stuff that doesn't require a lot of, education, some simple stuff like a body worship session, for example. Like, I put my feet in your face or something. I don't need a degree to put my foot in your face. So basically, I put together a very nice website. I designed and everything, wrote up everything. I decided on what my sessions were going to be, as far as like how long, and then what the cost was going to be. I think at the time I was charging like $300 for an hour or something like that, somewhere around that. And I just put the website up and I advertised it on my Twitter, and they would send me an email and say, hey, because I made like a little booking form and everything. There was no training. I didn't go to any type of dungeon to get trained. I just said, I want to try this. Let me just make a website. And I had a couple people that, contacted me by email. What's the word for it? Not scan. I don't know what word I'm trying to think of, but I, went through as far as determining whether they were safe or not. So I would ask them to send me their ID. I would have a conversation with them over the phone, usually, at least initially, just to get a feel for the person. And if I felt safe to go forward, then we would pick a time. Usually I would do this at a hotel or like a little rental spot or something like that. And whatever he paid for, that's what happened. And I did that a couple of times, but like I said, I wanted to do more, using tools and things like that. So, and I don't want to risk my freedom or somebody's safety. So I said I'll wait to continue with that. But that's how I did it. With some people will do is they'll get trained at what they call a dungeon. And it's basically you're going to be trained underneath a experienced dominatrix, someone who's probably had like 20 plus years in the industry. And I usually think those mentorships are paid for the most part. Um, excuse me, but that is an option that a lot of people do, is they just train under someone else who's experienced. But other than that, there's no law that says in order to be a dominatrix you have to da, 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 da. You can really just do what I did, to be honest, and just put a website up. People already know who you are. You've done virtual. I've had a lot of people go from virtual to in person just because they saw what I did, and they enjoyed that, so they wanted to bring it in person. And I just did it a few times just like that, and that was it.
Now, you talked about the mentoring for people who have been a dominatrix for a number of years. So I know a few people are watching and they're saying, all right, you're young. but maybe they're a little bit older. Maybe they got a few decades on you and they're like, can I do this in my 50s? Can I do this, later in life? Is that possible? Have you seen that in terms of the community overall?
The most successful doms I know are over the age of 48 years old. One thing I will say about the sex industry, I don't care what anybody says, you do not age out ever. I don't care if you are 22 or 68. I know one of my favorite dominatrixes. She turned 66 years old this year, and she is still camming. She's
Oh,
not an in
wow.
person, but she is still camming, and men love her. She's amazing. So there is no aging out. You don't age out. As a matter of fact, there are men who really respect and admire more the older workers. There is a segment of the population, a lot of men who love older women. So there is no aging out, and that's the beauty of it. Is it doesn't matter what your race is, what color you are, what age you are. It does not matter. There is going to be an audience for every type of woman. If you don't have a leg, there's an audience for you. I promise you. Natural hair, not natural hair, it does not matter. So the older doms, yes. If you are 55 and up, matter of fact, please do it if you're 55 and up, because there's an audience for you. I'm telling you, I see them every day when I log in, and especially the in-person ones. There's one dom I know. I don't know what her age is, but she is an older woman. I believe she's maybe possibly in her early 50s. She's from the UK. If I get her name, I'll put it there. But she is from the UK, and she's a Black woman, extremely popular. And
Oh,
all she does pretty much is mostly in-person sessions. She has her little like equivalent of an OnlyFans or whatever, but most of what she does is in person. And she has don't want to trigger anybody, but this is what we call them. She has slaves, she has submissives. I see her walk on her Twitter, walking these white men around on leashes. I'm telling you,
oh my gosh.
they love her. They love her. So I follow a lot of the older dominatrixes, and a lot of them, as they got older, they transitioned in person. I don't know exactly why, but I've seen them transition more into in person. It probably is because you get that experience level after 10 years or something like that, and you want to do something different. You already have that knowledge and education. So people start to want to see you in person.
Mhm.
And usually that's like a natural transition for a lot of women. So older women, definitely, if you feel like this might be for you, try it. Your age is nothing. I promise you.
I think that's a great point, because some people are like, I don't know, this sounds good for the young girls, maybe not for me. And you really basically said it doesn't matter race, age, anything.
No.
There's a niche for you, and to make it work for you. And I know we're right up against time. So if someone is on the fence and they're like, I don't know, what should they do? Should they start with like just hit the live button? Should they start with the phone sex side? What should they do to kind of put their toe in the water to figure out, is this a reliable option or pivot for them?
I think what I would recommend is, first off, you need to understand what is interesting. What is interesting about this industry to you? Like what are you going into it for? What is your purpose? And of course, that's going to depend. You may want to just get into it for money. You may get into it because it just looks interesting. You may want to get out of your job and have something flexible. So you have to really think about what's going to be your motivation to do this, because that might determine whether you're going to do it or not. If the motivation is not high enough, then whatever comes along with this industry might take you out quicker than somebody else whose motivation might be a little different. So evaluating that first, I think, is what's most important. And then once you discover, okay, this is my motivation while I want to get into it, like say, it just looks really interesting and I want to possibly make really good money, so I just kind of want to dig into it, then I would say, I wouldn't tell you, well, just cam, or well, just do phone sex, or well, just do texting. I would kind of think to yourself, if you had to choose between phone sex, camming, texting, foot pictures, whatever it is, write down all of the options that are available to you that you would be comfortable with that are in this industry, and then pick one. Just pick one that if you had to, buck up and try it that one day, you wake up Monday and then you're like, okay, I'm going to do something today. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to do that thing. Pick whatever that thing might be that gives you the least amount of anxiety or whatever you're feeling. So it might be, you know what? I just don't have it in me to get on cam yet. Maybe I can do a text. Then go on the text site and start texting with these guys. If anything, that might be helpful because you don't have to show your face. You don't have to live stream. It might be easier to just start with some texting, and then maybe you move on to phone, and then you might move on to something else that involves a little bit more of yourself. So that would be my advice, is just to do something on that list to get some experience in and start getting comfortable. And that might help you with either staying with that if that's what you decide, or maybe moving on to adding another egg to your basket, whatever that might be.
I think that sounds like a good plan. So we got a couple of websites in there, so you can go back and look in the chat, try those out. And then I want to know who does it. I want to know how it goes. Yes. I want to celebrate. I'm celebrating Miss Raven Black because she has created a life that is different from the life that she had just a few years ago. And, some people like, I don't know, but she went from the I don't know to I'm just going to take charge and live my life differently. So I celebrate you, and I want to celebrate y'all as y'all get into whatever it is that is next for you. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited because I'm like, you know what? Hey, I'm gonna be doing I need to research in incognito mode. See,
exactly. We all got to use the incognito mode. But no, I thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it because this can be so controversial. But I appreciate being able to at least give a different side of the world and a different way of employment for people that might be interested in just doing something maybe a little freaky, maybe something a little different. You never know.
Live it up. So until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. Someone says, how can they contact you? So can they contact you, Ms. Raven?
Yes, you can. So I will put the best way to get in contact with me is on Twitter, and you can find me on Twitter at Miss Raven Black.
Perfect. I am putting that in the comments. So if y'all want to reach out on Twitter, don't be wasting her time now. She charged about a minute. But we got some high fives and some thank yous. So thank you all for joining. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.